Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the metal cage, looking up at the 12 alien judges who would decide her fate. The courtroom was huge, bigger than any building she had ever seen on Earth. Strange lights floated in the air, and the walls seemed to bend and twist in ways that hurt her eyes to look at. She'd been standing here for 3 hours. Her legs ached, but she refused to show weakness, not here, not in front of them. The lead judge was a creature called Keltar from the Zenthari Empire. He looked like a giant insect with too many arms and eyes that glowed red in the dim light. When he spoke, his voice came out of a machine that made it sound cold and lifeless. "Captain Vasquez," Keltar said, "you stand accused of crimes against the Galactic Confederation. You have broken the most sacred laws of our civilization." Elena kept her face calm. She had expected this. 3 months ago, she and her team had found something amazing on a dead planet called Kepler 442b. Ancient ruins that were older than any civilization in the galaxy, and inside those ruins they had found technology that could open doorways to other dimensions. The Confederation said this technology was forbidden. They said it was too dangerous. But Elena knew the real reason they wanted it hidden. The elder races who ruled the galaxy were scared that younger species like humans might use it to become powerful enough to challenge them. "The evidence against you is clear," another judge said. This one looked like a floating blob of green jelly with tentacles. "You removed classified artifacts from a protected site. You conducted unauthorized research. You shared forbidden knowledge with your species." Elena almost laughed. Everything they said was a lie. The planet wasn't protected when they found it. The artifacts weren't classified until after they discovered them. And the only knowledge they had shared was with Earth scientists who were trying to understand what they had found. "Do you have anything to say before we announce your sentence?" Keltar asked. Elena looked around the courtroom. In the viewing area, she could see the other members of her crew. Dr. James Chen, her chief scientist, sat with his hands folded. His face was calm, but she could see the anger in his eyes. Commander Zara al-Rashid, her tactical officer, stared straight ahead like a soldier at attention. The rest of her team filled 3 rows of seats, all of them facing the same unfair trial. Behind them sat representatives from dozens of other species. Most looked bored or uninterested. A few seemed sad, but none of them would speak up for humanity. They were all too scared of the elder races. Elena had spent 15 years serving in the Confederation fleet. She had fought pirates, explored new worlds, and saved countless lives. She had believed in the Confederation's promise of peace and cooperation between all species, but now she saw the truth. The Confederation wasn't about cooperation. It was about control. "Yes," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the huge room. "I do have something to say." The judges waited. The audience leaned forward. Even her own crew seemed surprised. They had expected her to stay quiet, to accept whatever punishment was coming. "You call this a trial," Elena continued. "But we all know what this really is. This is a warning. A message to any species that dares to grow too strong, too fast, too independent." Keltar's red eyes flashed brighter. "You will not, I will speak," Elena said firmly. "You're about to exile me and my crew from Confederation space. The least you can do is listen to what I have to say." She turned to look at the viewing area, at all the aliens who had come to watch humanity's punishment. "For 15 years, I believed in the Confederation's dream. I thought we were all working together to build something better. But I was wrong. You don't want partners. You want servants. You don't want cooperation. You want obedience." "This is enough," another judge said. This one looked like a crystal that had somehow learned to talk. "Captain Vasquez, you will be silent or we will, or you'll what?" Elena asked. "Exile me." "You're already doing that. Kill me. That would make me a martyr, and you're too smart for that." She took a step forward, getting as close to the judges as her cage would allow. "Here's what really happened on Kepler 442b. We found proof that there used to be a civilization more advanced than anything in the current galaxy. They had technology that could have solved every problem we face. Energy shortages, disease, even death itself. And they left instructions, blueprints, guides for other species to follow." The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the judges seemed to be listening despite themselves. "But you don't want that technology to be found," Elena continued, "because if younger species had access to it, they wouldn't need you anymore. They wouldn't have to beg for scraps of your knowledge or follow your ancient laws. They could build their own futures." "The artifacts are dangerous," Keltar said. but his voice sounded less certain than before. They could destroy entire solar systems if used incorrectly. Elena smiled for the first time since the trial began. That's what you told us about faster-than-light travel, and artificial intelligence, and genetic medicine. Every time a younger species makes a breakthrough, you claim it's too dangerous. Then you take the technology for yourselves and dole it out slowly, keeping control. She looked directly at Keltar. But this time is different. This time you're too late. We already studied the artifacts. We already learned from them. And that knowledge is already spreading through human space. The judges began talking among themselves in their various alien languages. Elena could see the panic in their movements, the quick, sharp gestures that meant they were afraid. Dr. Chen caught her eye from the viewing area and gave her a tiny nod. Good. That meant the data packets had been transmitted before their arrest. Earth scientists would have the information they needed, even if Elena and her crew never made it home. After several minutes, the judges stopped their discussion. Keltar spoke for all of them. Captain Elena Vasquez and all members of her crew are hereby exiled from Confederation space. You have 72 hours to leave. Any human ship found within Confederation territory after that time will be destroyed without warning. The courtroom erupted in noise. Some aliens cheered. Others seemed shocked by the harshness of the sentence. Elena's crew remained silent, but she could feel their determination like heat from a fire. Furthermore, Keltar continued, Earth and all human colonies are expelled from the Confederation. All treaties are void. All trade agreements are cancelled. Humanity is now classified as a rogue species. Elena felt a moment of sadness. Millions of humans lived and worked throughout the galaxy. They would all have to leave their homes, their jobs, their alien friends. But then she remembered the artifacts and the secrets they contained. Maybe this exile would be the best thing that ever happened to humanity. As the guards came to escort her crew away, Elena spoke one last time. Her voice was strong and clear, carrying to every corner of the massive courtroom. You think you're punishing us, she said. You think exile will make us weak and desperate. But you're wrong. You're not exiling us from your galaxy. You're setting us free to build our own. The judges said nothing, but Elena could see the doubt in their strange alien faces. Good. Let them wonder. Let them worry about what humanity would do with their freedom. As the guards led her away, Elena smiled. The real work was just beginning. The ship, Prometheus Rising, drifted through empty space between the galaxy's spiral arms. Elena stared out the observation window at the endless black void. No stars here, just darkness that seemed to go on forever. They had been traveling for 8 months, and Earth was still 2 years away. Behind her, the ship hummed with activity. 847 people lived in spaces meant for 300. They had turned cargo bays into sleeping areas and converted the shuttle hangar into a makeshift hospital. Food was rationed, water was recycled 3 times, and the air recyclers worked constantly just to keep everyone breathing. Captain, Dr. Chen said as he entered the observation deck. He looked tired like everyone else on the ship. Dark circles under his eyes, clothes that had been worn too many times. I've got the latest analysis on the artifacts. Elena turned away from the window. In the months since their exile, Chen had become obsessed with the ancient technology they had found. He worked 18 hours a day, sleeping in his lab, eating while he studied. Elena worried about him, but she couldn't deny that his work was important. What did you find? She asked. Chen activated his portable display, showing a 3-dimensional image of one of the artifacts. It looked like a crystal twisted into an impossible shape, with lines of light flowing through its structure. I was wrong about what these are, Chen said. They're not just doorways to other dimensions. They're much more complex than that. They're beacons, Elena frowned. Beacons for what? For us. For humans. Specifically. Chen manipulated the display, zooming in on patterns within the crystal. Look at these energy signatures. They match human brainwave patterns exactly, not just similar, identical. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's cold air. That's impossible. Those artifacts are millions of years old. I know, but the evidence is clear. Chen brought up another screen showing complex equations. There's more. The mathematical principles embedded in the artifacts use a base 12 number system. Guess what number system human children naturally gravitate toward before they're taught base 10? Base 12, Elena whispered. And the dimensional coordinates encoded in the crystals, they point to specific locations in our galaxy's future, times and places where something important will happen, including one set that points to Earth, exactly 200 years from now. Elena sat down heavily in one of the observation deck's chairs. Are you saying these artifacts were made by humans? Not exactly, but they were made by someone who understood humans very well, someone who knew how we think, how we develop, how we would react to finding them. Chen closed the display and looked directly at Elena. I think they were left by our descendants, humans from the future trying to guide us toward something. Before Elena could respond, the ship's alarm began blaring. The lights dimmed to red, and Commander Al-Rashid's voice came over the communication system. All hands to emergency stations. We've got incoming contacts, multiple ships closing fast. Elena and Chen rushed to the bridge. Through the main view screen, Elena could see 5 sleek ships approaching from different directions. Their design was unmistakable. Confederation hunter-killer probes, automated ships designed to track down and destroy threats to the elder race's power. How did they find us? Elena asked. Unknown, Al-Rashid replied from her position at the tactical console. We've been running silent, minimal emissions unless... She looked at Chen. Doctor, have you been running active scans on those artifacts? Chen's face went pale. The dimensional resonance readings. I've been taking measurements every few hours. If the artifacts are quantum entangled with other devices in the galaxy, they've been tracking us the whole time, Elena finished. She turned to the helm officer. Emergency jump. Random heading, maximum distance. Jump drive is offline for maintenance, the helm officer reported. It'll take 20 minutes to bring it back online. Elena watched the enemy ships getting closer. The Prometheus Rising was not a warship. It was an exploration vessel with minimal weapons and shields. Against 5 hunter-killer probes, they wouldn't last 5 minutes in a straight fight. All non-essential personnel to the escape pods, Elena ordered. Prepare to abandon ship. Wait, Chen said. He was staring at his artifact readings with wide eyes. Captain, I'm picking up something strange. The artifacts are resonating with the approaching ships. Resonating how? The same dimensional frequencies. Those ships aren't just tracking us, they're connected to the same network as the artifacts. Elena felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in her mind. Are you saying the Confederation has been using this technology? More than that. I think the elder races found artifacts like ours long ago. That's how they became so advanced. But they've been hiding the truth from everyone else. The enemy ships were close enough now that Elena could see details on the view screen. They were beautiful in a deadly way, with curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal, but something was wrong with them. Parts of their hulls flickered and shifted as if they weren't entirely solid. They're using dimensional technology, Chen said, his voice filled with excitement despite their danger. Those ships can phase in and out of normal space. That's why the Confederation has been able to maintain control for so long. Elena made a decision that would have seemed insane an hour ago. Doctor, can you use our artifacts to interfere with their dimensional systems? Chen's fingers flew over his control panel. Maybe. If I can create a resonance cascade, disrupt their phase stability, do it. The next few minutes felt like hours. Elena watched the enemy ships close in while Chen worked frantically with the artifacts. The hunter-killers began charging their weapons, energy building along their strange, flowing hulls. Just as the first enemy ship prepared to fire, Chen succeeded. The artifacts on the Prometheus Rising suddenly blazed with brilliant light. The effect on the attacking ships was immediate and dramatic. They began flickering faster, their outlines becoming uncertain. One ship phased partway into normal space and got stuck, its hull tearing apart as dimensional forces pulled it in 2 directions at once. The other ships tried to retreat, but they couldn't stabilize their dimensional drives. Within minutes, all 5 hunter-killers had either destroyed themselves or fled into dimensions where the Prometheus Rising couldn't follow. Elena stared at the empty space where their attackers had been. Doctor, what exactly did you just do? Chen was laughing, a sound that bordered on hysteria. I proved it. The artifacts aren't just beacons or tools. They're keys. Keys to a dimensional network that spans the entire galaxy, and we're not the first humans to use them. He brought up his readings again, showing new patterns that had appeared during the battle. Look at this data. When the artifacts activated, they briefly connected with hundreds of other devices throughout the galaxy, all of them using the same human-specific frequencies. Elena sat down in her command chair, trying to process what she had learned. How many other devices? Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. All hidden, all waiting. Chen's excitement was infectious despite their desperate situation. Captain, I don't think we're exiles returning home empty-handed. I think we're the advanced scouts of something much bigger. Elena looked around the bridge at her tired, hungry, determined crew. They had been cast out by the galaxy's rulers, abandoned to die in the void between stars. But instead of dying, they had discovered something that could change everything. Set course for Earth, she ordered. Best possible speed. Yes, Captain. Estimated arrival time? Elena smiled for the first time in months. Not soon enough. We have a lot of work to do. As the Prometheus Rising jumped to faster than light speed, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Not by enemies this time, but by allies. Allies who had been waiting for them for a very long time. Earth looked exactly the same as Elena remembered, but she knew it was all an illusion. The blue and white planet hung before them like a perfect sphere of peace. The orbital traffic looked normal. Cargo ships moving between the moon colonies and the asteroid mining stations, passenger liners carrying people to Mars and the outer settlements. Even the Confederation monitoring stations were still there, though they hadn't responded to any communications since the Prometheus Rising entered the solar system. Take us to Luna Station, Elena ordered. Standard approach, no sudden movements. Commander Al-Rashid looked confused. Captain, shouldn't we head directly to Earth Defense Command? They need to know about what we discovered. Elena shook her head. Look at your sensor readings more carefully, Commander. Al-Rashid studied her tactical display, then her eyes widened. The power signatures are all wrong. Those ships out there, they're not using standard human technology. Exactly. While we've been gone, our people have been very busy. As the Prometheus Rising approached Luna Station, Elena could see the changes more clearly. The station looked normal from a distance, but the energy patterns were completely different. More advanced. And there were structures that hadn't been there 3 years ago, built into the moon's surface and hidden from casual observation. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. It's President Mitchell herself. Elena straightened her uniform. President Sarah Mitchell had been in office for only 2 years, but she had a reputation as someone who got things done. Put her through. The view screen showed a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She was sitting in what looked like a standard government office, but Elena noticed details that seemed off. The walls were too smooth, the lighting too perfect. Captain Vasquez, President Mitchell said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Welcome home. We have a lot to discuss. Thank you, Madam President. My crew and I are ready to report on our findings. I'm sure you are. But first I think you should see what we've been doing while you were away. Mitchell's image flickered for a moment, replaced by a view of Earth from high orbit. This is a real-time view from one of our new observation satellites. Elena watched as the image zoomed in on the Pacific Ocean. At first she saw nothing but water. Then the view shifted to show something that made her heart race. Massive structures rose from the ocean floor, hidden beneath the waves but clearly artificial. They stretched for kilometers in every direction, connected by tunnels and transport tubes. Underwater cities, Elena whispered. Just one of our little projects, Mitchell said, her image returning to the screen. We've also been quite busy in the asteroid belt, and Mars has some new features that our Confederation friends haven't noticed yet. Elena felt a mixture of relief and confusion. Madam President, how is this possible? The technology needed for construction on this scale. Let's just say that Earth scientists have been very motivated since the Confederation started restricting our access to advanced technology. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to be forced to solve it yourself. The Prometheus Rising docked at Luna Station, and Elena was surprised by what she found inside. The station's corridors were filled with people, but many of them weren't entirely human anymore. Some had cybernetic implants that seemed to blend seamlessly with their natural bodies. Others showed signs of genetic modifications that improved their strength or intelligence. A few seemed to exist as holographic projections, their consciousness transferred to digital form. This way, Captain, said the escort who met them at the airlock. He looked human at first glance, but Elena noticed that his eyes reflected light in an unusual way, and his movements were too precise, too coordinated. They were taken to a conference room deep in the station's core. President Mitchell was waiting for them, along with several other people Elena didn't recognize. The room itself was unlike anything Elena had seen before. The walls seemed to be made of living light, shifting and flowing in patterns that were beautiful and hypnotic. "Please sit down," Mitchell said. "I know you have questions and I'll answer as many as I can. But first I want you to understand something important. Your exile wasn't an accident." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "What do you mean?" "We knew the Confederation would react badly to your discovery of the artifacts. In fact, we were counting on it." Mitchell gestured to one of her companions, a man with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb, head of our Temporal Research Division." Dr. Webb nodded to Elena and her crew. "Captain, what you found on Kepler 442b wasn't the first artifact we've encountered. We've been finding them for over 50 years, hidden throughout human space, always in places where we would eventually discover them, always at times when we needed them most." Elena looked at Dr. Chen, who was staring at the table with a stunned expression. Dr. Chen figured out that the artifacts were left by future humans. What he didn't realize is that we've been in contact with those future humans for decades. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena found her voice first. "You're saying this was all planned? The discovery, the trial, our exile?" "Not planned exactly," Mitchell said. "Guided. Our descendants can't change the past directly, but they can leave suggestions, opportunities. The choice of what to do with those opportunities is always ours." Dr. Webb activated a holographic display showing the solar system. But this wasn't the solar system Elena knew. This version was filled with structures she had never seen before. Massive orbital platforms, ring-shaped constructions around the outer planets, and what looked like artificial suns scattered throughout the asteroid belt. "This is what Earth's solar system will look like in 50 years, Webb explained. "Our future selves shared these plans with us, along with the technology needed to build it. But they also warned us that the Confederation would never allow humanity to develop this freely." Elena was beginning to understand. "So you needed a reason to break free from Confederation control, a legitimate excuse to withdraw from their territory." "Exactly. Your discovery of the artifacts and subsequent exile gave us that excuse. The Confederation thinks they've contained the threat by banishing humanity to our home system. They have no idea that they've actually freed us to pursue technologies that make their advanced civilization look primitive by comparison." Commander al-Rashid spoke up for the first time. "With respect, Madam President, this is a lot to take in. Are you saying that we're already more advanced than the Confederation?" Mitchell smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Commander, would you like to see our latest starship design?" The holographic display changed to show a vessel unlike anything Elena had ever imagined. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, with curves that seemed to flow through dimensions and energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. "This is the Terra Nova," Mitchell said. "Our first fully dimensional warship. It can exist in 12 different dimensions simultaneously, travel instantly between any 2 points in the galaxy, and deploy weapons that operate on principles the Confederation hasn't discovered yet." Elena stared at the image, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. "How many of these ships do we have?" "As of this morning, 1,237, with more being completed every day." Dr. Chen finally looked up from the table. "The dimensional network I discovered. It's not just a communication system, is it? It's a transportation network. A way to move ships and people instantly across vast distances." "Among other things, yes," Dr. Webb confirmed. "Captain, your crew brought back the final pieces of a puzzle we've been solving for decades. With the artifacts you recovered, we can now activate the full network. Every hidden human outpost, every secret research station, every underground city will be connected instantly." Elena felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. Everything they had suffered, all the hardship of their exile, had been part of a larger plan. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. "What happens now?" she asked. Mitchell's expression grew serious. "Now we reveal ourselves to the galaxy. Tomorrow, human ships will appear in every major system simultaneously. We'll offer aid to oppressed species, establish trade relationships with anyone willing to deal with us, and make it clear that humanity is now a major galactic power. And the Confederation? They'll have a choice. Accept the new reality and work with us as equals, or face the consequences of trying to maintain their old system through force." Elena looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. These people had been planning and building while she and her crew struggled through the void. They had turned humanity's exile into an opportunity for transformation. "There's something else you should know," Mitchell said quietly. "The artifacts you brought back aren't just tools or keys. They're also weapons. Our future selves experienced a war with the Confederation's predecessors and won. The technology you've helped us unlock includes everything we need to defend ourselves if the elder races decide to attack." Elena nodded slowly. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar burden. "What do you need from me and my crew?" "Help us show the galaxy that exile doesn't make you weak," Mitchell replied. "Help us prove that sometimes being cast out is exactly what you need to find your true strength." Outside the Stambassador, Keltar's red eyes glowed, brighter with rage as he watched the holographic displays in the Confederation's emergency command center. Across the galaxy, human ships had appeared simultaneously in over 3,000 systems. Not just appeared, materialized out of nothing, as if they had stepped sideways through reality itself. "This is impossible," he hissed to the other Confederation leaders gathered around the massive conference table. 3 days ago, humanity was a broken, exiled species with a handful of obsolete ships. How can they suddenly deploy a fleet larger than our entire navy? The answer came from an unexpected source. A shimmering portal opened in the center of the room and a human stepped through. Not Elena Vasquez, but someone none of them had ever seen before. A woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. "Because," the woman said calmly, "you never understood what you were really fighting." Keltar reached for his weapon, but found that his arm wouldn't obey him. Around the table, the other ambassadors were similarly frozen, unable to move or speak. Only their eyes could track the human as she walked slowly around the room. "My name is Admiral Sarah Chen Vasquez," the woman said. "I'm Elena's great-great-granddaughter, speaking to you from a timeline approximately 400 years in your future. In my time, this exact conversation has already happened. In fact, it's happened dozens of times in dozens of different realities." She paused next to Keltar's chair, looking down at him with something that might have been pity. "You see, Ambassador, the cycle you represent has repeated itself countless times across the multiverse. Elder races achieve dominance, then spend centuries keeping younger species suppressed to maintain their power. Eventually, they grow weak from complacency while their victims grow strong from necessity. Then the cycle repeats with new elder races." The paralysis released suddenly and Keltar gasped for air. "Impossible. You cannot exist. Time travel is forbidden by the laws of physics themselves." Admiral Chen Vasquez smiled. "So is faster than light travel, yet here we all are. So is consciousness, yet you think and feel. The universe is full of impossible things, Ambassador. Your mistake is thinking that the Confederation's understanding of physics is complete." She gestured, and the room's holographic displays changed to show scenes from across the galaxy. Human ships offering aid to starving colonies, distributing medical supplies to plague-stricken worlds, and providing technology to species that had been denied advancement for millennia. "Look at what's happening out there. In just 48 hours, we've done more to improve conditions in the galaxy than the Confederation has managed in the past 1,000 years." Another Confederation leader, a crystalline being called Varthek, found his voice. "You are disrupting the natural order. Some species are not ready for advanced technology. Giving it to them freely will lead to chaos and destruction." "Will it?" the Admiral asked. "Or is that just what you tell yourselves to justify keeping others in poverty and ignorance?" The displays changed again, showing detailed reports from the aid missions. Species that had been struggling with energy shortages were now producing clean power from dimensional taps. Worlds that had been dying from environmental collapse were being restored with terraforming technology. Civilizations that had been confined to single-star systems were being given the tools to explore and expand. In every case, the recipients of our aid are using it responsibly, the Admiral continued. They're solving problems, building better lives for their people, and reaching out to help other species in turn. "The chaos you predicted hasn't materialized." Keltar's voice was filled with desperation. "Then why maintain the restrictions at all? If every species can handle advanced technology, why did the Confederation's founders create the controls in the first place?" "Because the founders weren't trying to protect younger species," Admiral Chen Vasquez replied. "They were trying to protect their own power, and they convinced themselves that this was for the greater good. She walked to the center of the room, where a massive holographic display showed the entire galaxy. Red dots marked Confederation-controlled territory, while blue dots showed where human ships had appeared. The blue was spreading rapidly, not through conquest but through invitation. Species were voluntarily asking for humanity's help. "Let me show you something that will happen in your near future," the Admiral said. The display shifted to show projections of galactic development over the next century. In Timeline A, the Confederation maintains its current policies. Technological development stagnates, younger species remain suppressed, and eventually the galaxy falls to an external threat. It's not advanced enough to resist. The projection was terrifying. Unknown ships arriving from beyond the galactic rim, easily overwhelming the Confederation's limited defenses, enslaving or destroying every species they encountered. In Timeline B, the Confederation adapts to humanity's new paradigm. Technology spreads freely. Every species develops according to its potential. And when the external threat arrives, the galaxy is ready. This projection showed a very different outcome. A unified galaxy with technology beyond anything currently imaginable, easily repelling the invasion and even reaching out to help other galaxies facing similar threats. "The choice is yours," Admiral Chen Vasquez said. "Cling to the old ways and watch civilization fall, or embrace change and help build something greater than any single species could achieve alone." Keltar stared at the projections, his mind racing. Everything he had believed, everything his people had worked for across millennia, was being challenged by this human from an impossible future. "Assuming we believe you," he said slowly, "what exactly are you proposing?" "Nothing dramatic. Simply acknowledge that humanity is now a galactic power and deserves a place at the Confederation's governing council. Stop treating technological development as something to be controlled and start treating it as something to be encouraged. Open your borders to free trade and cultural exchange." Another council member, a gaseous being that communicated through color changes, pulsed in agitation. "You ask us to abandon everything our civilization is built on. I ask you to save it," the Admiral replied. "The external threat I showed you isn't hypothetical. My instruments have already detected the first scout ships in nearby galaxies. You have perhaps 200 years to prepare, maybe less." She gestured again, and the room filled with new displays. Technical specifications for weapons and defenses that were clearly beyond anything the Confederation possessed. Ships that could phase through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Shields that could absorb and redirect energy on a stellar scale. Weapons that could manipulate time itself. This is the technology you'll need to survive what's coming. And it's the technology humanity is prepared to share freely with any species willing to work with us as equals. Keltar looked around the table at his fellow council members. Fear was visible in every alien face, but so was something else. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just the recognition that their old assumptions were no longer valid. "What guarantee do we have?" Keltar asked. "That humanity won't simply replace the Confederation as the galaxy's dominant power?" Admiral Chen Vasquez smiled sadly. "None whatsoever, Ambassador. Except for our actions. Look at what we're doing instead of what we could be doing. We have the power to conquer your territory in a matter of days, but instead we're offering aid to your people. We could demand tribute and submission, but instead we're asking for cooperation." She began to fade, her image becoming translucent. "I'm running out of time in this timeline, but remember what I've shown you. The choice you make in the next few days will determine whether galactic civilization survives or falls." "Wait," Keltar called out as she began to disappear. "How do we contact your people?" "How do we begin negotiations?" The Admiral's voice echoed as her image vanished completely. "You don't, we contact you. When you're ready to treat us as equals instead of threats, we'll know." The room fell silent as the Confederation leaders stared at the empty space where the impossible human had stood. Around them, the displays continued to show the spreading blue dots as more and more species chose to work with humanity instead of remaining loyal to the Confederation. Keltar closed his eyes and tried to think. Everything his species had believed about the natural order of the galaxy was crumbling, but maybe, just maybe, what would rise from the ruins would be something better. The future Admiral had shown them was both terrifying and wonderful. A galaxy united not through domination but through cooperation. Species working together to solve problems that had seemed impossible. Technology advancing so rapidly that even death itself might become optional. It was everything the Confederation claimed to want, but achieved through methods the Confederation had spent millennia rejecting. Emergency session, Keltar announced to the other council members. We need to discuss our options. As the alien leaders began their most important debate in 1,000 years, human ships continued to appear throughout the galaxy. Not as conquerors, but as helpers, offering gifts instead of demanding tribute. Sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. The exile was over. The real test was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Sol, and Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, watching ships from hundreds of different species work together in ways that would have been impossible under the old Confederation. The battle itself had lasted only 72 hours, but it had changed everything. When the Confederation's massive fleet arrived at Earth, they found something no military planner had prepared for. The human defensive network wasn't just ships and weapons, it was reality itself, reshaped into a maze of dimensions and impossibilities. Elena remembered the moment when Admiral Chen Vasquez's consciousness had merged with her own, sharing knowledge from a dozen different timelines. Suddenly, Elena had understood not just how to fight the battle, but why it had to be fought this way. The Confederation had to be defeated completely, but not destroyed. They had to be shown that their old methods were powerless against a species that refused to play by the established rules. The enemy fleet had entered normal space expecting a conventional battle. Instead, they found human ships that could attack from 12 dimensions at once, weapons that fired through time as well as space, and defensive systems that turned their own firepower back against them. More confusing still, the humans didn't try to destroy the Confederation fleet. They disabled ships instead of destroying them, captured crews instead of killing them, and offered medical aid to the wounded. By the end of the battle, half the Confederation fleet had switched sides. Madam President, Commander Al-Rashid said as she approached Elena's position. The title still felt strange to Elena, but the election had been unanimous. Every human colony, every space station, every settlement had voted for the woman who had led them through exile to victory. Just Elena? Zara? Elena replied with a smile. We've been through too much together for formal titles. Al-Rashid, now Elena's chief of security, gestured toward the massive construction project, visible through the station's transparent aluminum windows. The delegates from the Andorian Council have arrived. That makes 87 species confirmed for tomorrow's ceremony. Elena nodded, watching as ships of every conceivable design docked with Unity Station. The station itself was built from the wreckage of the old Confederation tribunal, where Elena had been sentenced to exile. It seemed fitting that the place where humanity had been cast out would become the center of the new galactic government. The Galactic Democratic Union was still a fragile thing, only 2 years old and constantly threatened by those who preferred the old ways. But it was growing stronger every day. Species that had been enemies for millennia were learning to work together. Technologies that had been restricted to elder races were now shared freely among all members. Any word from the Xanthari delegation? Elena asked. Ambassador Keltar sends his regrets. Al-Rashid replied carefully. He says his people are still adjusting to the new paradigm. Elena sighed. The Xanthari Empire had been the most resistant to change. Even after their military defeat, many of their leaders insisted that the old hierarchies were natural and necessary. But their younger generation was different. Xanthari students were attending human universities. Xanthari scientists were contributing to research projects. And Xanthari artists were creating works that blended their traditional styles with influences from dozens of other species. President Vasquez? Dr. Chen's voice came through Elena's communication device. Could you come to Research Lab 7? We've got something you need to see. Elena made her way through Unity Station's corridors, marveling at how much had changed since the early days of exile. The station was a living demonstration of cooperative technology. Xanthari crystal growing techniques had been combined with human engineering. Altarian energy systems powered Denebulan computing arrays, and Arcturian artificial intelligence helped coordinate transportation systems based on Rigelian mathematics. Lab 7 was one of the station's newest additions. Dedicated to studying the temporal artifacts that had started everything, Elena found Chen standing before a massive display, showing the dimensional network that now connected thousands of star systems across the galaxy. We've made contact, Chen said without preamble. Direct two-way communication with our future descendants. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. How far in the future? 800 years, approximately. They wanted to congratulate us on breaking the cycle. What cycle? Chen manipulated the display to show a complex timeline stretching back millions of years. This pattern we've been living through, elder races dominating younger ones until they're overthrown and replaced. It's happened dozens of times. Our future selves have been observing it across multiple galaxies, trying to find a way to break it. Elena studied the timeline, seeing the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Each time the same pattern repeated, a species would achieve dominance, establish control over others, grow complacent, and eventually be overthrown by those they had oppressed. But we did something different, Elena realized. Exactly. Instead of replacing the Confederation as the new dominant power, we created a system where no single species can dominate others. The Democratic Union doesn't just include humans. It gives equal representation to every member species, regardless of size, age, or technological level. The display showed projections of the galaxy's future under the new system. Instead of the cyclical rises and falls that had characterized previous eras, there was steady, consistent growth. Species working together to solve problems that no single civilization could handle alone. There's more, Chen continued. Our descendants sent us a gift. The complete technical specifications for something they call the Universal Translator. Elena frowned. We already have universal translators, not for languages, for concepts. This device can help different species understand not just what others are saying, but what they mean on a fundamental level. It translates cultural contexts, emotional frameworks, even basic assumptions about reality. Elena began to understand the implications. Most conflicts between species arose not from malice but from misunderstanding. The Xanthari believed in natural hierarchies because their evolutionary history had been shaped by hive mind structures. Humans valued individual freedom because they had evolved as hunter-gatherers. The Altarians thought in terms of collective responsibility because they existed as a group. Consciousness, if we can help species truly understand each other. The remaining barriers to cooperation should dissolve naturally, Chen finished. Our descendants say this is how the cycle gets permanently broken. Not through conquest or domination, but through understanding. Elena looked out through the lab's window at the ship surrounding Unity Station. Tomorrow would mark the 5th anniversary of humanity's exile from Confederation space. The ceremony they had planned was intended to celebrate how far they had come, but now Elena realized it could be something more. The beginning of something entirely new. How long until the Universal Translator system is ready? She asked. The hardware is simple. We can have production units ready within weeks. The real challenge is the cultural database. We need detailed psychological and sociological profiles of every member species. Elena smiled. I think I know how to get those. Sarah, please ask all the delegates to extend their stays. Tell them we have something extraordinary to show them. Over the next month, Unity Station became a hub of unprecedented cooperation. Anthropologists, psychologists, and sociologists from every member species worked together to create the most comprehensive study of galactic consciousness ever attempted. The work was challenging. Some concepts simply didn't exist in certain cultures, but the results were revolutionary. When the first Universal Translator was activated, the effect was immediate and profound. A Xanthari diplomat and a human philosopher sat down to discuss the nature of authority, and for the first time in galactic history, they truly understood each other's perspectives. Not just intellectually, but emotionally and culturally. Within hours, conflicts that had seemed intractable began resolving themselves. Trade disputes dissolved when species realized they had been arguing about completely different things. Military tensions eased as former enemies understood that their seemingly aggressive actions had been based on entirely different definitions of what constituted a threat. Elena stood once, again on Unity Station's observation deck, but now she was not alone. Representatives from nearly 200 species stood with her, watching as the first convoy of ships prepared to leave for the Magellanic Clouds. The expedition would establish the Democratic Union's first extragalactic outpost, carrying the new model of cooperation beyond the Milky Way. It's hard to believe, said Tavara, the Vulcanian delegate, Her voice translated not just into English but into emotional contexts Elena could understand. 5 years ago you were exiles. Now you're leading us to the stars. Elena shook her head. We're not leading anyone. We're all going together. As the convoy engaged their dimensional drives and vanished into the space between galaxies, Elena reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. The Confederation's attempt to exile humanity had backfired in ways they could never have imagined. Instead of weakening humans, it had freed them to become something new. And in becoming something new,